The moment Oliver Langley dropped to his knees on the sidewalk, clutching his daughter's pink backpack and trying to catch his breath, he didn't expect a woman in a silk blouse and heels to be crying her eyes out just 10 feet away. "Daddy, I'm hungry," Hazel whispered, tugging his sleeve. "I know, sweet pea." He kissed her forehead, forcing a smile. "Just a little longer, okay?" Hazel's kindergarten had called hours ago she'd spiked a fever. Oliver had left his shift at the auto shop, unpaid again. He'd rushed to the ER, but the wait was hours long, and his wallet held less than $20. That's when he heard the woman. She was sitting on the low concrete ledge near the hospital exit, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees, her eyes red and glassy. Her long dark hair was pulled into a loose chignon, and her coat definitely designer was slipping off her shoulders as she stared blankly ahead. Her hands trembled. Oliver hesitated for a second. He had his own problems. But something about the way she was breathing shallow, uneven made him step toward her. "Hey," he said softly, crouching down while keeping Hazel close. "Are you okay?" The woman flinched, then looked up. Her eyes were striking bright, sharp, and terrified. "I'm fine," she said quickly, too quickly. He didn't believe her for a second. "You don't look fine." She scoffed, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "That obvious, huh?" Oliver gave a half laugh. "Let's just say, I know what it looks like when someone's holding it together by a thread." She glanced at Hazel, who was now leaning sleepily against Oliver's chest, her little hand gripping his shirt. "Your daughter." "Yeah," he said, brushing Hazel's hair gently. "Hazel, she's 5. Fever hit out of nowhere." "She's beautiful," the woman's voice cracked. "What's her name?" "Hazel Langley, I'm Oliver." He paused. "And you?" The woman hesitated. "Lena," she said finally. "Lena Lively." "That's a name you don't forget." Oliver smiled. Lena tried to smile back, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I just found out my mother's cancer came back. She didn't tell me. I only found out because her assistant called me by accident." Oliver's gaze softened. "I'm sorry." "She didn't want me to worry, but I'm her daughter. That's my job." Oliver sat beside her, Hazel on his lap. "You're allowed to fall apart. No one gets through stuff like this perfectly." She looked at him for a long beat. "Are you always this kind to strangers?" He shrugged. "You looked like you needed someone." Silence stretched between them for a moment, but not in a bad way, just quiet, real. Lena pulled the coat tighter around her. "I'm not usually like this. I usually have everything together, structured, controlled." Oliver chuckled. "Well, you picked the right place to fall apart. Everybody's a mess at a hospital." Lena let out a shaky breath. "You're not what I expected." "Let me guess," he said, raising an eyebrow. "You thought I was some down on his luck single dad who can't pay his bills." "Well," she said, tilting her head, "you did mention you left work early, and you're sitting outside the ER with no food and a sick kid in your lap." He really laughed for the first time that day. "Fair." Lena's phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She glanced at it and sighed, ignoring the call. "I should go. My driver's waiting." Oliver blinked. "Driver?" She stood slowly. "I'm sorry for dumping all that on you. You didn't have to listen." "I didn't mind," he said honestly. She reached into her coat and pulled out a sleek white business card. "If you ever need anything, like anything, call me." He took the card, confused. "Lena Lively, Lively Group." She smiled faintly. "Yeah." He looked up at her again, realization dawning. "Wait, you're that lively, like the Billionaire one." She gave a small shrug. "I guess so." And before he could say anything else, she turned and disappeared into the waiting black town car that pulled up at the curb. Oliver stared at the card in his hand and shook his head. "What's a billionaire doing crying alone outside a hospital?" he muttered. Hazel stirred. "Daddy, can we go home?" "Yeah, baby," he picked her up carefully. "Let's go home." 3 days later, Lena couldn't stop thinking about him. She sat in a boardroom, surrounded by men in suits debating a merger worth over $800 million. And all she could picture was the man with oil-stained hands and the little girl who looked at him like he hung the moon. She hadn't meant to break down like that. She hadn't cried in public since she was 13. But something about Oliver, his calm voice, his easy warmth had cracked something in her. And now she couldn't stop wondering if Hazel's fever had broken, if Oliver had gotten her medicine, if they were okay. So she did something she never did. She called the hospital and asked for him. They didn't give out patient info, of course, but someone remembered the little girl with the fever and the dad who kept asking how much antibiotics cost. That night, Lena stood outside the same hospital, holding a brown paper bag. Oliver stepped out of the automatic doors, his expression stunned. "Lena." "Hi," she said nervously. "I brought food for Hazel and you." He blinked. "You came back." She nodded. "Couldn't stop thinking about you too." Oliver looked down at the takeout bag. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." He took it slowly. "Thank you." Hazel peeked out from behind him, sleepy but better. "Is that the pretty lady, Daddy?" Oliver turned red. "Hazel." Lena laughed. "Hi, Hazel. I brought you some mac and cheese." Hazel lit up. "The good kind." "The very best." Oliver shook his head, still stunned. "You really didn't have to." "I know," Lena said, her voice soft, "but I wanted to." She looked at him, unsure for the first time in a long time. And he looked right back, something shifting between them. Something real. Something neither of them expected. The grilled cheese had gone cold by the time Oliver realized he hadn't touched it. Hazel was asleep on the couch, curled beneath the extra blanket Lena had dropped off that morning alongside a bag of groceries and a prescription she somehow managed to get filled without him even knowing. He tried to argue, but she'd waved him off with a look that could silence a courtroom. Now, hours later, he sat at the tiny kitchen table in his run-down apartment, the business card she'd left before still wedged beside a napkin dispenser with a cracked corner. The knock on the door startled him. He glanced at the clock, nearly 9. He opened it only to find Lena standing there again, this time wearing jeans and a simple blouse, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. In her hands was a small white bakery box tied with twine. "I figured you probably don't get a lot of desserts that don't come from a vending machine," she said. He stepped aside without a word, motioning her in. "Hazel's asleep," he said quietly, "but she'd lose her mind if she saw cake." "There's more than enough for both of you," she replied, setting the box on the counter and glancing around. "I hope I'm not overstepping. I know keep showing up uninvited." "You're not," he said, "but most people don't just drop in on strangers they met on a sidewalk." She gave a faint shrug. "You weren't a stranger for long." He didn't know how to respond to that. She looked around, eyes lingering on the chipped paint near the window, the worn linoleum floors, the mismatched chairs. "You're doing a lot with very little." "I'm doing what I can." He leaned against the counter. "It's not much, but Hazel doesn't know the difference. She thinks hot dogs and canned peaches are gourmet." "She's lucky," Lena said. "Not every kid has someone who shows up for them." He tilted his head. "You say that like you know what it's like." "I do." He waited, but she didn't elaborate. Instead, she walked over to the table, sat down, and opened the box. Inside were 2 slices of tiramisu, so delicate they looked like they belonged in a Parisian cafe. "I used to eat this with my mom when I was little," she said, "before everything got complicated." Oliver joined her, watching as she slid a plate across to him. Complicated how? She remarried when I was 8. The man she chose thought children should be seen, not heard. So I learned to stay quiet, to listen more than speak, to make myself useful. He took a bite of the dessert. It melted on his tongue. I'm guessing that's when the control everything part of you was born, he asked. She looked up sharply. You remember that? I listen, he said simply. Lena's features softened. Yes, that's exactly when. He nodded, then looked down at the dessert again. This is probably the best thing I've tasted in years. I figured you could use something sweet. He hesitated. Why are you doing all this, helping me, bringing food, coming back? I don't know, she admitted. I felt different after talking to you, like I could be real for once. No meetings, no headlines, no pretending. You don't have to pretend around me. I know, she said quietly. That's what scares me. He studied her, the way her fingers fidgeted with the edge of the twine, the way her voice dipped when she was being honest. You're not what I expected either, you know, he said. Oh, she raised an eyebrow. I figured someone, with your kind of money, would be colder, arrogant, wearing diamonds and issuing commands. Detached, he said, like none of this would matter to you, but here you are, sitting in a tiny apartment with a broken heater, eating tiramisu with a mechanic who probably smells like motor oil half the time. She glanced down at her plate, then back at him. It matters, more than you know. He didn't respond right away. When he finally spoke, it was careful. Can't offer you anything, not really. No fancy dinners, no limos, just this. She looked around. This is more real than anything I've had in months. A sound from the other room made them both pause. Hazel shuffled out, rubbing her eyes, hair a tangled halo around her face. Daddy, she mumbled. Oliver stood immediately. Hey, baby, you okay? She looked at Lena, then at the table. Is that cake? Tiramisu, Lena said, smiling gently. Want some? Hazel nodded and patted over, climbing into Oliver's lap without hesitation. As Lena carefully handed her the fork, Oliver watched the two of them, his daughter, and this woman who'd somehow gone from stranger to something else entirely in his kitchen, like they belonged there. Hazel took a bite and grinned. Tastes like clouds. Lena laughed, and for a moment, the tension in the room melted. Oliver didn't know what this was, or where it was going, but he knew one thing. She'd walked into his life when he least expected it. And something told him she wouldn't be walking out anytime soon. Oliver stood perfectly still, watching Hazel tilt her head toward Lena's shoulder as the last of the tiramisu disappeared. Her tiny hands rested in her lap, and her cheeks had taken on that gentle flush she always got when she was content and safe. The apartment's heater rattled softly in the background, but the air didn't feel so cold anymore. Lena glanced up, her fingers resting lightly beside Hazel's now empty plate. She's going to fall asleep right here. She does that when she's warm and full, Oliver said, lowering his voice. Out like a light. I can carry her, Lena offered, brushing a few strands of hair from Hazel's forehead. No, I've got her. He scooped Hazel into his arms with practiced ease. Give me a second, I'll put her to bed. When he returned, Lena was standing by the narrow window, looking out at the street below. What's it like? He asked, drying his hands with an old kitchen towel. She didn't turn around. What? Having the kind of life where you never have to worry about things like rent or grocery lists. She exhaled slowly. It's not what people think it is. Try me. Lena turned to face him. It's quiet, too quiet. Everyone around you is either trying to impress you or take something from you. You start to wonder if anyone really means what they say. He leaned against the edge of the counter. Guess that explains why you were crying alone outside a hospital. You were the first person in weeks who didn't want anything from me. You say that like it's a rare thing. It is. He crossed his arms. So what are you doing here again, Lena? I don't know, she said honestly. I told myself I was just checking in on Hazel, but that's not the whole truth. Then what is? I wanted to see you again, she said, her voice lower now. I keep thinking about the way you looked at me like I was just a person, not a name on a Forbes list. He let that hang in the air before answering. You are just a person, same as me. Her gaze didn't waver. That's why I'm here. A silence settled between them, but it wasn't awkward. It felt like something was shifting, something they hadn't acknowledged yet. Oliver straightened. I've got work early tomorrow. If I don't get under a hood by 7, my boss starts threatening to dock hours. She nodded, stepping toward the door. I should go. He followed her, opening it slowly. Thanks for the food. Hazel's gonna talk about that cake for a week. She can have it anytime she wants. I know a place that makes it better than anyone. She'll hold you to that. As she stepped into the hallway, she paused. I'm flying to Chicago tomorrow. There's a board meeting I can't miss. Right. I'll be gone 3 days. He met her eyes. Safe trip. She hesitated. Will you be here when I get back? I live here, he said simply. She gave a small nod and left without looking back. That night, Oliver lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling while Hazel breathed softly in the other room. Something about Lena's absence felt noticeable already. Like a light had been turned off in the apartment without him realizing it had been on. 3 days passed. He didn't expect her to call. She didn't. He didn't expect her to text. She didn't do that either. But on the 4th day, he stepped out of the shop after finishing an oil change and found a woman waiting beside his truck. A woman wearing jeans and a navy sweater, with her hair twisted up and sunglasses hanging from her collar. Told you I'd come back, Lena said. He walked toward her slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. Thought you were in Chicago. I was, flew back early. He raised an eyebrow. Why? Because, couldn't stop thinking about you. He looked at her for a long moment. You flew back from another city because of that. I've never done anything like this before, she admitted. I've never let myself want something that didn't come with a contract or a press release. And now, I want to know what it feels like to want something real, even if it's messy, even if it doesn't make sense. He studied her face, searching for anything that felt rehearsed or calculated. There was nothing, just her. I've got grease under my nails and 2 past due bills in my glove box, he said. I've got 3 assistants, a penthouse I never sleep in, and a mother who thinks emotions are a weakness, she replied. So we're a perfect disaster. Maybe, she said, but I'd rather be a disaster with you than a masterpiece alone. He didn't say anything. Instead, he reached for her hand. As he didn't flinch. He didn't let go. And just like that, something between them shifted again, but this time, it settled into place. The sky above Manhattan was the color of steel, and the city buzzed beneath it, oblivious to the quiet storm in Lena's chest. She stood at the edge of the rooftop garden that crowned the lively group headquarters, the wind tugging at the hem of her blazer, her heels silent against the stone tiles. The skyline stretched out before her like a kingdom hers, technically, but it had never felt so hollow. Behind her, the heavy glass doors opened. You could have just waited in the lobby, she said without turning. I did. Oliver's voice was calm, steady. For 20 minutes, your receptionist offered me sparkling water in a glass that cost more than my rent. Lena finally turned. He looked just as he had the last time they'd seen each other, tired around the eyes, hands rough from work, but grounded in a way that made everything else feel irrelevant. She walked toward him slowly. "I wasn't sure you'd come." Hazel insisted, said if I didn't take you to the park this weekend, she'd go with you herself. Lena laughed, surprised by how easily his presence cut through the weight she'd been carrying all day. "I wouldn't mind." She also asked if you'd bring that cloud cake again. She remembers. She doesn't forget anything that matters. Lena looked at him, the smile slipping away. "I've been thinking about that night, when you asked me what it's like living like this." He nodded. "I didn't tell you the whole truth," she said. "I didn't tell you about the way every decision I make is dissected by shareholders, or how every person I date makes headlines before we've even ordered dinner." "You don't have to explain." "I want to," she said, "because I've been asking myself what it would be like to stop living for everyone else, and every time I picture that, I see you." Oliver didn't answer right away. He stepped closer, his voice low. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that." "You're not supposed to do anything," she said, "but I had to tell you." He studied her for a moment. "You're not just some woman who walked into our lives with bakery boxes and expensive coats. You're Lena Lively. People know your name in countries you've never set foot in." "And yet," she said, stepping closer, "I've never felt more like myself than I do when I'm sitting in your kitchen, watching Hazel fall asleep with chocolate on her face." His throat worked silently, his jaw tense. "I know what this looks like from the outside," she continued. "It's impossible, right? A billionaire and a mechanic, but I don't care. I'm tired of making decisions based on what the world expects." Oliver looked out at the skyline, his voice thoughtful. "I've spent my whole life trying to be just enough, enough of a father, enough of a man, and somehow you make me feel like I already am." "You are." He turned back to her. "Then let me ask you something." "Anything." "Are you willing to give up the illusion of a perfect life for something real, even if it's messy, unpredictable, and a little unpolished?" She didn't hesitate. "I already have." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded envelope. Carefully, he handed it to her. "What's this?" "Hazel's drawing," he said. "She made it yesterday, said it was a picture of our family." Lena opened it slowly. Inside was a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands in front of a crooked house with a pink roof. One of the figures had long hair and what appeared to be a sparkly crown, while the smallest held a giant fork. "She said you're the queen," Oliver said, "and she drew the fork because you bring the best food." Lena's eyes burned. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered. "Neither did I," Oliver replied, "but maybe that's the point." She looked up at him, her voice trembling. "Do you think we could really do this? Build something from scratch?" "I think we already have." He stepped forward, placing his hands gently on her waist. "And I think it's time we stop pretending it's temporary." The kiss, when it came, wasn't rushed or dramatic. It was quiet and sure, like 2 people finally stepping into the same truth. When they pulled apart, Lena's forehead rested against his. "I want to come home with you," she whispered. "You don't need a penthouse." "I need pancakes on Sunday mornings, and Hazel asking me to braid her hair." He smiled. "We might not have much, but we have room for you." That night, Lena didn't return to her apartment in the Upper East Side. Instead, she carried a duffel bag into Oliver's 3rd-floor walk-up, where Hazel greeted her with a sleepy hug and a whispered, "I saved you the good pillow." Days turned into weeks. Lena rearranged her schedule to work remotely 3 days a week, taking conference calls from a folding chair beside Hazel's art table. Oliver built her a small desk in the corner, using salvaged wood from the garage. They fought over dishes, took turns making dinner, and kissed in the doorway when Hazel wasn't looking. One evening, while Lena was helping Hazel spell out her name in glitter glue, Oliver walked in holding a small box. She looked up. "What's that?" He knelt beside her, opening it to reveal a ring shaped like a delicate circle of stars. "It's not fancy," he said, "but it's yours if you want it." Lena didn't speak. She just nodded, eyes wet, and let him slip the ring onto her finger as Hazel clapped behind them. And in that tiny apartment, beneath flickering lights and the sound of cartoons playing in the background, Lena, lively billionaire, CEO, woman once defined by power, finally found her forever. Not in skyscrapers or boardrooms, but in the arms of the man who saw her first as a person, and in the little girl who called her family. The first time Lena opened a toolbox, she nearly dropped a wrench on her foot. Oliver leaned against the garage workbench, arms crossed, watching her carefully. "You sure you want to do this?" "I've closed deals worth hundreds of millions," she said, squinting at the engine in front of them. "I can learn how to replace a brake pad." "That's not a brake pad," he said, biting back a grin. "That's the alternator." "Well," she muttered, brushing her hair back with the back of her wrist, "I'm learning." She'd started coming to the garage 2 days a week, unannounced at first. Then, as part of a schedule she created herself, a color-coded calendar pinned to the fridge back at the apartment. Hazel had drawn tiny hearts next to the days Lena would be home before dinner. Oliver never asked her to be there. She just started showing up, tying her hair into a knot, rolling up her sleeves, and asking questions like someone who wasn't afraid to get messy. She'd been in rooms with prime ministers and venture capitalists, but nothing made her hands tremble quite like holding a socket wrench. "You're not trying to impress me, are you?" Oliver asked as she fumbled with the ratchet. "I'm trying to know you," she replied. "This is where you think, where you breathe, that matters to me." He stepped closer, gently guiding her hands. "Here," he said, "you want to feel the tension shift, not force it." Their fingers brushed. She didn't pull away. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past. But inside the garage, the world narrowed to the hum of proximity and the quiet intimacy of shared effort. Later that night, Lena stood in the kitchen rinsing grease from her wrists while Hazel colored at the table. She glanced at Oliver, who was drying dishes with one hand, the other spinning a spoon absent-mindedly against his palm. "Have you ever thought about expanding?" she asked. He looked up. "The garage." "You're always booked solid. You turn away 5 cars a week. You could hire another mechanic, maybe 2, open a second location." He dried the last dish and hung up the towel. "I've thought about it, but there's never been time or money." "There's time now," she said softly, "and I want to invest." He hesitated. "Lena." "I'm not offering a handout. I'm offering a partnership. You expand the business the way you want, and I help with the structure. No strings, just belief." "You trust me that much?" She smiled. "I love you, that's more than trust." He stepped toward her slowly. "Say that again." "I love you," she said, voice steady. "Not the idea of you, not the story of us, just you." He kissed her then, without hesitation, without fear, like a man who knew exactly what he'd found. She tasted like soap and something sweet, maybe the honey from the tea she'd made for Hazel, who was now pretending not to watch from behind her picture book. They didn't say anything else that night. They didn't need to. Weeks passed. The second garage opened across town, and Oliver hired 2 new mechanics, one a woman who reminded Lena of herself when she first started in business. Sharp, determined, and relentless in the face of doubt. Hazel started kindergarten full-time, and her first art project was a sculpture made of glued bolts and a paper crown. When Oliver asked what it was, she said, "It's you and Lena. She wears the crown, and you fix stuff." They framed it. spring arrived with a slow bloom. On a quiet Sunday, Oliver packed a picnic in the back of the truck and drove them to a clearing just outside the city. Hazel chased butterflies while Lena lay on the blanket, watching sunlight flicker through the trees. "You ever think about the future?" he asked, lying beside her. "I used to plan it down to the minute. Now, just want it to include you." Oliver reached into the bag at his side and pulled out a small velvet box. She sat up. "You're not serious." "I've never been more serious." He opened it. Inside was a ring unlike anything she'd ever seen. A single oval sapphire, deep blue, set in a band of interwoven gold. Organic, undeniably her. "I don't have a yacht," he said, "or a villa in the south of France. But I have a truck that runs, hands that work, and a daughter who already calls you hers." Lena's breath hitched. "I want to marry you," he said, "not because it makes sense, but because not doing it would be the only thing that doesn't." She didn't cry, she didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said, "yes to this life, yes to you." They married in a botanical garden Hazel chose herself. She wore a dress with pockets and walked down the aisle between rows of wildflowers. Oliver wore a navy suit and forgot to breathe when he saw her. Hazel stood between them, holding the rings, grinning like she'd planned the whole thing. Lena didn't arrive in a limo. She walked the last 100 feet barefoot because her heels sank into the grass. And when she reached Oliver, she whispered, "This is better than any empire I've ever built." Their vows were simple. His, "I promise to stand beside you, even when the world tells us we don't fit." Hers, "I promise to choose us, over and over, even when it's hard." They kissed under the open sky, surrounded by the people who mattered, the only kind of luxury that ever really counted. That night, after the guests had gone, and Hazel had fallen asleep in a nest of tulle and ribbon, Lena and Oliver lay tangled in each other beneath a string of fairy lights behind the garden. "You still think we're a disaster," she murmured. "No," he said, brushing his thumb along her jaw. "We're the best kind of unexpected." She smiled, "Then let's keep surprising each other." And they did. They built a life of mismatched schedules and shared breakfasts, of birthday parties in the park and oil-streaked overalls beside designer handbags, of love that didn't ask for permission, only presence. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And it was forever.